Good morning, everyone. It's morning here anyway. I hope things work well today. Had a couple wacky adventures recently with attempts at recording for you. On the shared screen, I am at the home page. I'm going to go to the modules. And I have some quotes from Sachs' River of Consciousness. Down below the 1.2 page, getting started with the course, some general info about Sachs, a bunch of different online links, which you are welcome to use for the first couple assignments to find quotes from Sachs, some info on the 7 ways of thinking that we'll be using throughout the semester, and some details on the first of those 7, ethics, and several quotes that I picked from the first chapter and the beginning of the second chapter that, again, anyone is welcome to use for the first couple assignments. And what I'm going to do is zoom in a little bit and go ahead and collapse this window, this left menu, and even zoom in a little bit more, and pretty soon this blue bar on the side is going to go away too. There we go. So again, 1.2 page, some general info about the course, the text, lots of links to online quotes from Sachs, some info about the different perspectives we'll be looking at. One of the things I like about Sachs' work, and part of the reason why I picked it for this course, is because he examined life from a wide variety of perspectives. And even though you may not see the word ethics a whole lot in the book, people who wrote about Sachs and interviewed him talked about how his work helping the general public understand the experience of different people was an ethical effort on his part. And one of the things I would like to do for students getting started is to discuss, if there were people out there responding, some of the ethical implications of what may seem predominantly natural science related to Darwin and his study of plants. For those who are trying to write about ethics this first week and seeing a lot about natural science, I wanted to try to provide some ideas on the way I might go about things. Okay, so one, from Sachs's perspective, I think he appreciated how Darwin was not only studying animals, which I believe a lot of us were taught to be Darwin's focus in his work on evolution. And I think Sachs, being someone who studied a variety of different perspectives and from a different perspectives and worked with different people, not only natural scientists and neurology, where he was typically described as an expert, but broader across natural sciences and into social sciences and the ethical implications of science as well. As you are going through this course, thinking about your own topic, depending on your major and your interests, some of the different ways you may be looking at things are the science of politics, the politics of science, the ethics of religion, the religious aspects of the religious implications on logic, etc. How different perspectives and different points of view can inform a broader perspective. And likewise, right here with Darwin, this expression here that Darwin explained as hybrid vigor, or down here below, cross fertilization, that provided evidence for his scientific theory, but also may lend perspective in other fields as well, that the interaction is beneficial and sometimes even required. I'm thinking about how I did this on the version I tried to record yesterday that ended up with no audio. So I'm trying to move a little bit faster today. I'm trying to say things in a little bit different way, but also to use a couple of the ideas that I did mention yesterday. Okay. And one of the aspects that I was taught growing up about Darwin was how, for some people, evolution seems to be a challenge, and for some people, even an unethical challenge to religion. And as far as a broader perspective, providing more understanding, even though this expression right here says Darwin and not God, but that the broader perspective provided more understanding. That in the previous explanation of things using religion, which in this class we'll file under metaphysics, to try to explain the natural world, there became points where different features didn't have as much of an explanation as the newer version was able to come up with. So that here, again, for some people, it's an either or, but it's also possible to see not conflict between the two ideas, but a broader understanding. Now, I am trying to make some suggestions on ways different people might see this. I'm also trying to think about how Sachs might have appreciated Darwin's efforts, not only working in different perspectives, but in how those work together to provide a broader understanding, and also trying to provide a service to society and humanity, without necessarily jumping in with my own opinion on those things. That's where the pause comes through. So let me try to summarize as I move on to the next idea. So Darwin was out in the field looking at animals on islands and noticing how the separation led to diversity of the species. That's much of what I was taught about Darwin's work. And Sachs is looking at how much of his work with flowers was done in the laboratory as a more experimental style, rather than what I was taught, again, about traveling to islands and observing in the natural world what was out there. But with experimentation, you can also make predictions. And this particular orchid led him to predict a certain kind of moth, which was then later found. And observation, experimentation, two different ways of going about things. And experimentation is possible under certain conditions and less possible in other aspects of life. For example, Darwin couldn't really create two different islands, place them on different parts of the planet, let a few thousand years go by, and then go see how the animals diversified. He had to find different islands in the world to see that. In the laboratory, he could do different things. Let's see. Up here on some of the other ones he was talking about. Hybrid seeds, if you look at these pages right here, and then further down below, doing experiments with growing plants to see how they react to different conditions. And as far as ethics goes, some of the notes I've given you up above talk about the ethics of treating human beings. Some people are also interested in making sure that animals are treated ethically in experimentation. And there are fewer people who think about the ethical treatment of plants during experimentation. The human experimentation with plants on a widespread basis, planting different hybrids or genetically modified foods, or allowing or encouraging invasive species and other challenges to the indigenous plants around the world is something that people have been talking about for quite a while. But if you're interested, you can even search for, do plants feel pain? And not only Darwin, but a lot of us know that plants are sensitive to the environment and respond to various aspects. Whether or not that implies that we should treat individual plants with ethical consideration is something that you might want to think about if you are interested. And that's what I'm trying to do. Not necessarily tell everybody that you should all think about all of these things, but to imagine some ethical aspects to what may seem like a lot of natural science ideas. Okay, some more with predictions and ideas where Darwin was ahead of things. He will later talk similarly or write similarly about Freud and Freud's natural science work, whereas I think a lot of us were taught about Freud in psychology or social science, what we're going to call in this class broadly politics. But some of these ideas toward the end of chapter 1 may start to seem or appear more related to ethics. So, for example, natural beauty, art, or aesthetics. This word does show up in the text. It's what we will be looking at last as the seventh way of thinking about things. The art of science here. And not only the art of science, but again, the art of nature. And for some people before Darwin, or even today, who want to reject what they consider an anti-religious theory of evolution might find it interesting to think about how Darwin was, in some ways, combining natural science with the understanding before, the previous understanding that called it a beautiful art of creation, and that science doesn't necessarily reject the beautiful creation explanation of things, but to give it a functional, adaptational, evolutionary explanation. And here in this line, again, if a lot of us were taught that Darwin's work on evolution focused on animals, as I was, it might be interesting for some of us to see how this work in plants did provide not only the experimental understanding that I mentioned before, but also documented evidence as well. And I didn't mention this time, I talked about it more in the previous attempt to record this, but I found it interesting. Let me jump back up to here about bees and butterflies, which, when studied along with historical evidence of the plants and the animals, led to the development of the idea that the plants evolved to attract the pollinating insects, and that some plants that emerged before certain insects used different techniques, and that the plants that evolved after bees appeared used different tactics to attract bees who could see different ranges of the visible spectrum, and to us as well the ultraviolet spectrum. So the butterflies, for example, which are not mentioned right here, see different aspects of the electromagnetic spectrum or different colors, and different flowers attract butterflies than attract bees, which see different aspects or different colors. And this plant down here, his mother was telling him, was such an old plant that it emerged before bees or butterflies, and so developed a different method to attract different insects for fertilization. And that this, rather than leaving Darwin feeling as if he had no foundation for the meaning of life and was left confused and without satisfaction or understanding, that this way of thinking about things complemented his feelings or his understanding of life. And similarly, this made me feel happy when I learned this in a strange way. When I was taught a long time ago that humans and chimpanzees share so much of our DNA, it was often, I think, taught to me as a chastisement of our pride, that we shouldn't be too proud because we have so much DNA shared with chimpanzees. But this, to me, makes me feel happy. And then it's strange, too, to think that plants and animals share so much DNA. But this is the way Sachs, in his much more elegant phrasing, came up with his happy feeling about that we are not only all of us humans on this planet related to each other, but all forms of life, and even more with plants than I had imagined would have percentage-wise been shared. And this idea right here as well, to me, appears to imply more ethics than it literally states. But if we are all related, all forms of life, then that seems to imply some ethical responsibility as well. And he's telling us here, if a certain branch is cut off, not if it dies, but if something happens to cut it off, as if somebody's doing something, then that can have irredeemable effects. Something that we might want to keep in mind. Then I can tell by the topics here that this is right around where chapter 2 begins. And I put in a couple other notes toward the end here with some references to ethical implications, as well as a little bit of explanation for how this photographic technique he's describing here, or techniques to both slow and speed motion, to slow down fast motion and speed up slow motion, or effectively allow him to see it as sped up or slowed down, was part of what helped him develop looking at the world and the data he was analyzing from different perspectives. So how do we go about seeing the world from different perspectives? If it's considered an ethical effort for us to consider how other people, or I'll go ahead here and say beings, perceive the world or experience the world, and if that's one of the ethical aspects of Sachs' work, how do we go about doing that? Feeling the emotions of another person may require some abstract discussion, but to try to see how a plant grows, or to do some things with a camera so that we can see it, can be described in a mechanical way, so-called stop motion photography, where a picture is taken, say, once a minute, and then arranged into something like a film. And literature can try to help us feel different perspectives. If a character is a time traveler and the character is describing the experience in a way that's intended to suggest what that experience might feel like, we can use a camera to try to do it. We could read a novel or watch a movie that tries to explain things. But how about actually living a different perspective? What would we need to do to be able to do that? And he's referencing here animals with different lifetime spans and animals with different perceptive qualities or features to their experience. So if we typically register 10 perceptions per second, and human beings live to a maximum of somewhere around 100 years, what if there were some creature that could note 10,000 impressions per second? That creature might live much, much shorter time period. That may imply that living at a higher perception experience wears out the organism in a shorter time span. And you may have heard how animals with higher heart rates tend to have shorter lifespans than animals with slower heart rates. And Sachs is wondering if that is not only the mechanical experience of the heart wearing out, but something about the perception of impressions as well. Something about perhaps some maximum limit to the organism's ability to live and experience different sensations. So that if an animal only lived a month, their ideas of the seasons would be different than an animal that lived several years. And an animal that only lived a couple hours would have a different experience about day and night than an animal that lived for more than one sunset or multiple times. And over very short amounts of time, or in emergency situations, chapter 2 starts talking about how people can feel as if time moves at different rates. There's the old expression, time flies when you're having fun, etc. And Sachs, that is, describes how different films try to show people the perception of speed being conveyed in different ways using both sped up and slowed down versions. One of the ideas that I haven't yet talked to a coach about, and I realize I need to edit this. I believe that's feet or meters right there. And if any of you do anything similar, you might have something to say about it as well. I have experienced the lag time or the delay with music when recording or trying to play music over the internet with different people. And I can tell you that somewhere around 7 milliseconds is where the delay lag starts to be noticeable. And Sachs is here talking about how some racers apparently can physically start moving before their conscious mind registers that they've actually heard the gun. That's what I haven't talked to a coach about yet, but I would like to and see what they have to say about that. I know that the lag time in music, having tried that internet stuff during the COVID shutdown and the machine's speed varying below below the point where it became obviously perceptive and disruptive to the feeling of the music, to where I could notice it, but it was still okay, to the point where it was so slow that it really disrupted things and didn't work anywhere near simultaneously. That was kind of interesting to me to hear. It wasn't much fun to try to live through and try to play music that way. But I don't know about the runners or competition swimmers as well use that kind of starting gun, if anyone has anything to comment on that. And this again is Sachs thinking about our speed of perception and how much we can experience in a unit of time, having something to do with the way our brains actually process information. And if any of you are interested in so-called cognitive science, this is something that people have been trying to understand for a while. How does our brain actually process the information that comes in? And that may not be all the same on the way in and the way out. And then the rest of the book goes on to other topics. Now, I hope this video worked today. I hope all of this was somewhat helpful to try to summarize a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and zoom out and back up the page a little bit too. Turn this guy back on. From the home page, I went to modules. The very first module overview has some brief info from the college, a general, I hope, encouraging message from me in which the wind was almost blowing everything all over the place. Next, this page 1-2 has some general welcome info. Welcome, by the way. I hope everyone is doing well. Some info on SACS. You are welcome to use any of these videos to find a couple quotes from SACS to get started with. If you already understand all of this about all of these 7 different ways of thinking, hooray, that's fantastic. If not, don't worry at all. That's what I was trying to help people feel with that first video. Jump on in, find a couple quotes from SACS that you can relate to. If you already understand the 7 ways of thinking and how we're starting with ethics, that's fantastic. If you end up using a couple different quotes from SACS that you can relate to, compare, contrast to other ideas, and you later start to work out which of those ideas are more related to ethics or how you can bring in ethical ideas in conjunction with what you did think of, that's fine as well. This video is going to end up right here, and it may make more sense after having looked over the rest of this, but I wanted to put this up in a couple different formats. I don't think as a student I would want to sit and listen to the instructor talk the way I did this way, but some students have told me that they do find it useful. So please let me know. I can do more writing for you. I can do more videos for you. You're always welcome to contact me directly through the inbox if you have questions, concerns, or requests on ways to do things. And why don't we wind this up? It's probably already way too long as it is. Thanks, everybody. Take care.